So welcome, and today we're going to discuss about another process of an inventory costing method, which is a slight rendition from a previous one that we spoke of. Particularly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to calculate ending inventory using dollar value Lifo. So as we've seen before with our other four methods, our Lifo, FIFO, average cost, and specific identification, all of those costing measurement methods dealt with one particular thing, and that was units. We were able to take the units and follow the track of the units and give us an actual dollar value amount of our ending inventory and our cost of goods sold based on the flow of those units. Now we're going to switch it over a little bit, and under this particular method, the dollar value LIFO method, we ignore units. We do not follow the cost flow of the inventory based on the flow of the units. The cost flow of the inventory is now based on the value. So we take the value, the actual value amount, not the units amount, but the actual value amount, and we use that in a systematic way to calculate our ending inventory. Okay, and so I'm going to show you how to do this particular method, and it's called dollar value LIFO. And so basically we have up here an example of some information that will be given to you. And what I need to write here, let's assume that our beginning inventory for 2013 is $500,000. So I'll write that beginning inventory 2013 equals $500,000. Okay, so we start off with a beginning inventory in 2013 of $500,000. And then the rest of the information will be provided as well. Okay, so at the end of 2013, our ending inventory cost is $556,500. At the end of 2014, ending inventory is $596,200. At the end of 2015, our ending inventory is $615,250. At the end of 2016, our ending inventory is $720,000. And based on this information, we're going to calculate the ending inventory based on dollar value LIFO for each one of those 4 years. Now, what they've also given us, which we have to use in order to perform the proper calculation, is a cost index. Okay, so this cost index will be given to you. All right, so there's a systematic step approach for us to be able to calculate this. And the first thing we have to do is we have to calculate ending inventory at the base year's cost. Ending inventory at the base year's cost. So it's very simple. Since this is our base year, because it's beginning inventory, and this is the very first year that we started off with our inventory, we're going to use this as our base for all of the following years. Okay? So, the beginning of 2013, right? Our base, our ending inventory based on the base year, which is 500,000. Since 500,000 is the base year, we're going to divide it by 1. 1 representing the base year. You always divide your base year by 1. Okay, so technically our answer for this component is going to be 500,000. Now, following from that, we're going to take the particular ending inventory for that particular year, and we're going to divide it by its cost index. Very simple. So at 12 December 2013 year end, the ending inventory was 556,500, and we're going to divide that by its respective cost index, 1.05. We're going to take 2014 December year end. The amount was 596,200. We're going to divide it by its cost index, which happens to be 1.10. We're going to continue forward. We're going to take the next following year in, which gives us 615,250 divided by its cost index of 1.15. And lastly, we're going to take the very last year, 2016, and we said that that was 720,000, and we're going to divide that by its also respective cost index of 1.25. Okay? And so we look at the answers for that. For the end of 2013, we get 530,000. For the end of 2014, we get 542,000. For the end of 2015, we get 535,000. For the end of 2016, we get 576,000. So this is step one, okay? And this is calculating ending inventory at base year cost, okay? And never mind the titles, technically, but these are the steps, okay? So we're going to take this information from step one, and we're going to move forward to step two, okay? Now, what's going to happen now is we're going to create layers for every additional year that moves forward, okay? And I guess it's easier for you to see what I'm saying, but what you have to do is pay attention to how the rise in the value of our inventory is increasing. And by that amount of the rise, we're going to apply the cost index to that, okay? So for example, for the first year, step two, our base is 500,000. And so we're going to leave it just like that because that's the only thing that happened as at the beginning of the base year, okay? So now we're going to layer based on this value for the next preceding steps, okay? So now we move on to the end of that year, 2013. We carry forward that base, okay? So we drop that base down, which is 500,000. And we pay attention to the change in the value of the inventory. The change in the value of the inventory, what happened? It started at 500, then it rose to 530, correct? So the inventory increased. It increased by how much? $30,000. That's what we're going to report at the end of this particular year. So that $30,000 increase needs to be reported. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the sequential basis indexes, that we've already divided, and we're going to multiply them this time. Okay. So, of course, we say the base year always has a 1 index, 100% index. So we're going to multiply that times 1. Now the second year, well, the end of that year, 2013, had an index of 1.05. So we're going to take this 30,000 and multiply it times 1.05. Okay? So now we've summarized the movement in that 12-month period. Now we're going to do the exact same thing and layer it for the next year, the next following year. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the same stuff down. We're going to layer everything. Okay? So again, I'm going to just draw a line. Again, for the end of 2014, we have to layer. So we go back to our original base year, 500,000. You know the index is 1. We carry forward the change in the previous year. The change in the previous year was 30,000, right? So we carry forward that 30,000. Multiply that times 1.05, the respective index, right? But let's notice what happened. Let's observe what's happened from 2013 to 2014. We started out at the end of 2013 with 530,000. By the end of 2014, the value did what? Rose. It went from 530,000 to 542,000. How much did this stuff rise by? It rose by for 12,000, right? 542 minus 530 gives you $12,000. And so that increase in the value has to be reported and adjusted by its respective index. So again, the difference in between these two numbers was 12,000, so we're going to report 12,000, and we're going to multiply it times this index of 1.10. Okay? We're finished with that particular year. We're going to move down again. So now we're at the end of 2015, and we still have to layer stuff, right? We still have to layer stuff, okay? So we know obviously we're going to start with our base, $500,000. And the base year is always multiplied by 1. Then we're going to move down to $30,000. And we see before that the index was 1.05, okay? But I'm going to stop right here. I want to stop right here because I want you to pay attention. As we saw before, since we started this particular method, we noticed that the value of our cost of inventory each year has done what? Went up, right? 500 to 530 went up by 30,000. 530 to 542 went up by 12. But look what happened with the value by the end of 2015. We went from 542 to 535. So this time, in contrast to the other previous years, the value of our information did what? Go down, right? It went down. It started out with 542, but it actually went down to 535. Whenever you have a decrease in this method, that amount of the decrease has to come from the previous amount, the previous layer amount. It has to come from the previous layer amount, okay? So, obviously, we went down. What's the difference between 542 and 535? The difference is 7,000, right? The difference is $7,000, right? And our previous layer was what? 12,000, okay? So the difference between the 542 and the 535 was 7,000. And where does it have to come from? Our previous layer. What was our previous layer? Our previous layer was 12,000. You guys can see. Previous layer was $12,000. So it needs to come out of that 12,000. How much? The difference in the decrease in change. Whenever you have a decrease in change, it has to come from the previous layer. So that decrease is 7,000. The 7,000 has to come from the 12,000 of the previous layer. So we subtract 7 from 12. That leaves us with what? 5. So that previous layer cannot be reported at 12,000 anymore. It has to be reported at what? 5,000. Why? Because we had a decrease in our value. So it reduced our previous layer. What was the index for the previous layer? 1.1. Okay? Now, what about this index? This index in this decrease that happened, right? It happened in 2015, a decrease, and the index is 1.15. Will we do anything with that index? No. When you subtract from a previous layer, you use that previous layer's index. And since you didn't use this year's index, or you didn't create a new layer because the value decreased, you ignore the index. This 1.15. So we're going to ignore this because we didn't create a new layer. We had to take out from the previous layer due to that decrease in the value. Okay? So for this year, this is all we have. And then we go to the very last, 2016. So, again, we have to report our layers again. So we start out with the base, 500,000 times 1. Second layer was 30,000 times 1.05. We saw that our last layer was 5,000 because we had to adjust it, remember? And the index for that was 1.10. And notice what the value have done this time from 2015 to 2016. Our value has done what? Risen. It went from 535,000 to 576,000. So that's a good thing. We don't have to take away from the previous layer this time. We have to add a new layer. Okay? So the difference in between these two numbers is going to give us 41,000. So 41,000 for this year is going to be what we're going to report. And again, we use the index of this year, 1.25. Okay? And so we're almost home now, guys. All we have to do now is find the product of all this information. And then this will give us our ending inventory for each respective year. I'm going to draw a line here. Okay? So the answer so for the beginning of 2013, the ending inventory for dollar value is going to be 500,000. Okay? And we have to do the math here, guys. So 500,000 times 1 is 500,000. 30,000 times 1.5 is 31,500. Let's go down. 500,000 times 1, we already calculated, 500,000. 30,000 times 1.05, 31,500. 12,000 times 1.10 is 13,200. We carry down what we just calculated, 500,000 again. 30,000 times 1.05, 31,500. And remember, we had to decrease and adjust our last previous layer. So now we have to calculate 5,000 times 1.1. That's going to give us 5,500. And then we carry forward all that for the next year. Again, 500,000, 31,500. 5,000 times 1.10 is 5,500. And 41,000 times 1.25, the new amount, is 51,250. Okay? Now, what we're going to have to do is add these components to get our answer for each year. So we're adding the sum of those numbers that we've just finished multiplying. So if I add 500,000 times 31,500, obviously I'm going to get 531,500. If I add these three numbers, the 500,000 times plus the 31,500 plus the 13,200, I'm going to get 544,700. If I add up the 500,000 plus the 31,500 plus the 5,500, I am going to get 537,000 flat. Lastly, if I add up the 500,000 plus the 31,500 plus the 5,500 plus the 51,250, I'm going to get 588,250. Okay? And these are the respective answers that you're looking for. These are the ending inventory under dollar value LIFO for each year. For each year. Okay? To rewatch this, it's a long process, but it's a rather easy process. And you should be able to calculate this with no due time. One of the benefits of this particular method versus the other ones is that you don't have to account for the units, so it's not as tedious of following how many units. Think about it. If you're dealing with a big company, you could have thousands, even millions of units. And that can get real crazy trying to keep track of all that. So this simplifies the process by ignoring the units and just following the flow of the actual value of its cost.